The courtroom was packed to capacity, the air thick with anticipation and the weight of untold secrets. All eyes were on Katt Williams as he stepped up to the witness stand. His expression was fierce, unwavering, a man prepared to shatter decades of silence and expose the dark underbelly of Hollywood. Katt's voice cut through the hush as he began recounting the hidden world he had witnessed, a world far removed from the glitz and glamour broadcast to millions. He spoke of secretive gatherings, exclusive events where the trajectory of careers was decided behind closed doors. These weren't just parties, Katt declared, his tone steady yet charged with emotion. They were tests, pressure chambers where entertainers were broken down, reshaped, and controlled. He detailed the stringent NDAs that shackled attendees, binding them to silence and obedience. The room absorbed his words, the gravity of his revelations sinking deep. Katt's testimony took a sharp turn as he named names, celebrities who had risen swiftly after succumbing to these manipulative rituals. He singled out Kevin Hart, alleging his rapid ascent was tied to saying yes to exploitative arrangements, a stark contrast to Katt's own refusal to conform. Steve Harvey was painted as a key figure in maintaining industry silence, accused of stealing Katt's ideas and facilitating Diddy's control over the entertainment world. The courtroom gasped as Katt laid bare a culture of complicity, intimidation, and betrayal, implicating a web of high-profile personalities caught in a cycle of fear. Defense attorneys scrambled to discredit Katt, questioning his motives and casting shadows on his credibility. But Katt stood resolute, unwavering in his mission to reveal the truth. Katt Williams paused briefly, allowing the weight of his words to settle before diving deeper into the darker realities of Hollywood's controlling mechanisms. He spoke candidly about the pressure placed on black male comedians to conform, often at the cost of their identity and integrity. He recalled personal anecdotes of rejecting roles that demanded he wear dresses or perform in ways that betrayed his authentic self. It wasn't just about entertainment, Katt explained, it was about fitting into a mold designed by others. The courtroom listened intently as Katt highlighted the mysterious disappearances of comedians like Dave Chappelle and Martin Lawrence, careers seemingly halted not by personal choice, but by unseen forces wielding power behind the scenes. He described how leverage was maintained through media clips, carefully curated images, and covert surveillance rather than formal contracts. It's control without accountability, Katt said grimly. The tension in the courtroom escalated as he began revealing Diddy's alleged use of hidden cameras and surveillance to gather compromising footage of artists, tools of intimidation and blackmail that kept many silent. Katt recounted stories of celebrities who vanished after hinting at industry secrets, victims of a ruthless system designed to erase dissent. The sudden distancing of Steve Harvey from Diddy was cited as a chilling example of this culture of fear. Despite attempts by the defense to undermine his testimony, Katt remained composed, detailing the personal costs he endured for speaking out, lost opportunities, isolation, and being labeled crazy to dismiss his claims. In a powerful closing statement, Katt emphasized his choice to prioritize freedom and authenticity over a $50 million offer, rejecting financial gain in favor of peace of mind. The courtroom was left in stunned silence, the truth Katt laid bare challenging not only individuals but the entire industry's foundation. The courtroom's atmosphere was tense as Katt Williams took a moment to steady himself before continuing his testimony. His eyes scanned the room, jurors, media, legal teams, all awaiting the next revelations that would challenge Hollywood's carefully constructed illusions. Katt began by addressing the insidious pressure exerted on black male comedians to conform to a narrow set of expectations. He recounted his own experiences of rejecting roles that forced him to don women's clothing or perform in ways that compromised his identity. It wasn't just about the jokes or the stage, Katt explained. It was about being someone else's puppet, someone else's creation. And I refused. He highlighted the chilling parallels between his struggles and the sudden, unexplained disappearances of fellow comedians Dave Chappelle and Martin Lawrence. Both had stepped away from the spotlight amid rumors of industry pressures, and Katt alleged these departures were less voluntary than publicized. Katt's voice grew solemn as he described the covert methods of control, how media clips were weaponized, and how hidden surveillance cameras in Diddy's properties were used to gather compromising footage on artists. This footage served not just as a security measure, but as leverage to silence dissent. The courtroom shifted uncomfortably as Katt revealed that many artists vanished after hinting at industry secrets, victims of a ruthless system that punished those who dared to speak out. He cited the example of Steve Harvey's sudden and unexplained distancing from Diddy, interpreting it as a sign of the pervasive fear among those entangled in this web of manipulation. Despite aggressive cross-examination by the defense aimed at questioning his credibility, Katt stood firm, detailing the personal and professional consequences he endured for breaking the silence, from lost opportunities to social isolation and character assassination. Katt's testimony was a stark illumination of the price paid by those who choose truth over complicity in an industry shrouded in secrecy and control. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as Katt Williams steadied himself and prepared to share some of the darkest and most unsettling truths he had endured. His gaze swept across the room, locking eyes with jurors, legal teams, and reporters alike, all waiting to hear what many had feared but few dared to speak. He began by recounting the pervasive atmosphere of surveillance that hovered over Hollywood's elite. Diddy's properties, he explained, were equipped not merely with cameras for security but with hidden devices designed to capture every whispered conversation, every unguarded moment, every potential vulnerability. This was a network of control, Katt explained, voice low but unwavering. Not protection, but power. Power to manipulate, to threaten, to silence. He described how this surveillance created a culture of fear, where celebrities knew their every move was being watched and recorded. Private moments became ammunition, and the threat of exposure kept many in line, terrified of what could be unleashed if they spoke out. Katt told of friends and colleagues, talented, vibrant artists, who had vanished from public life after alluding to secrets they could no longer keep. These disappearances were not coincidences but orchestrated removals, designed to maintain the status quo. The courtroom was rapt as Katt shared these accounts, weaving together stories of loss, fear, and courage. He highlighted Steve Harvey's abrupt distancing from Diddy as a stark example, a man once close to the epicenter now forced to retreat under pressure. Defense lawyers launched a fierce counterattack, labeling Katt's claims as conjecture and questioning his motives. Yet Katt held firm, his testimony punctuated with precise details and compelling narratives that resonated with the jury. He described the personal toll, nights of anxiety, the isolation from peers, and the relentless battle against being dismissed as crazy. Katt spoke candidly about the cost of his honesty, opportunities lost, friendships strained, and a reputation under siege. This is more than a trial, Katt asserted passionately. It's a fight for truth. For justice. For those who have been silenced. The courtroom's energy shifted, the gravity of his words settling deeply. It was clear that this testimony was a turning point, not just for the case but for the entire industry. As the day drew to a close, anticipation buzzed in the air. More revelations awaited, promising to unravel further secrets and ignite the call for change. The atmosphere in the courtroom grew heavier as Katt Williams continued, his voice steady but filled with the weight of years of pain and defiance. He recounted how, after daring to speak out, he was systematically branded as crazy, a label wielded like a weapon to discredit his voice and isolate him from the industry and peers. It was a tactic, Katt explained, to make sure no one would listen. To paint me as unstable so that my truths could be dismissed as ramblings. He described the chilling consequences of this campaign against him. Opportunities vanished overnight, offers were withdrawn without explanation, and long-standing relationships fractured under invisible pressures. I was erased, Katt said, his eyes reflecting the depth of his struggle. But I refused to be silenced. The betrayal cut deepest when he spoke of colleagues who, despite knowing the truth, chose silence over solidarity. They chose self-preservation over justice, he lamented. And that was a lonely place to be. Katt's testimony was interspersed with accounts from other witnesses, each corroborating his experiences of pressure, isolation, and intimidation. Their stories painted a picture of an industry where conformity was enforced not just by contracts, but by fear and manipulation. The defense attorneys ramped up their efforts to undermine Katt's credibility, painting him as a disgruntled performer motivated by revenge and attention. Yet, Katt's calm demeanor and detailed recollections left little room for doubt. The judge and jury sat captivated as the full scope of Hollywood's shadowy mechanisms began to emerge. It was clear that these were not isolated incidents but part of a calculated system designed to control and suppress. In a moment of raw honesty, Katt declared, I chose freedom over fortune. I chose authenticity over acceptance. And I stand here today, unbroken. The courtroom stirred, whispers spreading among the crowd. The battle was no longer solely about Katt Williams, it had become a symbol of resistance against a culture of control. Outside, the media frenzy intensified. Social movements rallied around Katt's courage, amplifying calls for accountability and systemic reform. As the session came to a close, the tension lingered. The trial had revealed more than just facts, it had ignited a fire. The media storm surrounding the trial grew into a full-blown frenzy as Katt Williams' testimony echoed beyond the courtroom walls. Headlines screamed revelations that rocked the foundation of Hollywood's power structures, and the public's appetite for truth surged. Major record labels convened emergency meetings, urgently reviewing contracts and management strategies in light of the allegations. The industry was forced to confront uncomfortable truths that had long been ignored or suppressed. Celebrities and influential figures began distancing themselves from Sean Diddy Combs. Social media posts were deleted, public appearances cancelled, and cautious statements issued as the fallout expanded. Katt's words had sparked a movement, survivors and advocates rallied, using social platforms to share stories and demand accountability. Protests erupted outside the courthouse, voices rising in unison for justice and reform. Inside the courtroom, the defense struggled to regain control amid the swelling public pressure. Their arguments grew more frantic, yet the tide had unmistakably turned. The courtroom battles intensified, but the momentum was clearly with those seeking change. Supporters of Katt and the broader movement filled the gallery, their presence a visible reminder of the growing demand for transparency. The trial had evolved from a legal dispute into a cultural reckoning, exposing systemic abuses and challenging long-standing power dynamics. The courtroom buzzed with an intensity that mirrored the turmoil sweeping through Hollywood and beyond. Inside, the defense team mounted fierce attacks, attempting to discredit Katt Williams and downplay the gravity of his accusations. But outside, the narrative was rapidly shifting, fueled by an outraged public and emboldened survivors. Record labels scrambled behind closed doors, urgently reassessing contracts and artist management policies. The trial's revelations had pierced the veil, forcing industry giants to reckon with a legacy of exploitation and silence. Celebrities once allied with Sean Diddy Combs began to distance themselves. Social media accounts were scrubbed, endorsements quietly withdrawn, and scheduled appearances abruptly cancelled. The power dynamics that had long protected the elite were beginning to crack. Meanwhile, activists and survivors harnessed the momentum, transforming outrage into organized action. Social media became a powerful platform for sharing stories of abuse, solidarity, and resistance. Hashtags trended globally, echoing demands for justice and systemic reform. Inside the courtroom, the defense's efforts grew increasingly desperate, their rhetoric sharp but losing ground to the tide of public sentiment and mounting evidence. The prosecution seized the moment, pressing for accountability and systemic change. Outside, peaceful protests swelled, voices unified in their call to end the culture of silence and impunity. The trial was no longer merely a legal proceeding, it had become a symbol of a larger movement for transformation. The courtroom witnessed not only a battle for justice but a reckoning that promised to reshape the entertainment industry and the societal structures that underpinned it. The final day of the trial arrived under a cloud of intense anticipation. The courtroom was filled with a mixture of hope, tension, and solemnity. Everyone present, jurors, attorneys, spectators, and the media, knew that the conclusion of this case could send ripples far beyond the walls of the courthouse. Katt Williams took the stand once more, delivering a closing statement that resonated with conviction and vulnerability. He spoke not only of his own journey but of a collective call for justice, truth, and systemic change within an industry that had long thrived on secrecy and control. "This is bigger than me, bigger than one trial," Katt declared. "It is about breaking cycles, giving voice to the silenced, and demanding accountability." The prosecution and defense then presented their final arguments, each side urging the jury to see the case through their lens. The tension in the room was palpable as the jury prepared to deliberate. Outside, the world watched and waited, the verdict poised to shape not only careers but the very fabric of the entertainment industry. The jury filed back into the courtroom with solemn faces as the judge prepared to deliver the verdict. Every breath was held as the courtroom awaited the outcome that had captivated a nation and shaken the foundations of an industry. Katt Williams sat quietly, his heart pounding, but his expression was one of quiet resolve. He had spoken truth to power, exposed the shadows, and now awaited justice not only for himself but for countless others. The judge's voice rang out, clear and authoritative, as the verdict was read. Relief, shock, and a mixture of other emotions rippled through the room. Some wept openly, others sat silently, processing the weight of the moment. Outside the courthouse, a crowd of supporters and activists erupted in cheers and chants, their voices rising in unison, a testament to the power of courage and the promise of change. In the days that followed, the impact of the trial was felt across Hollywood and beyond. Contracts were scrutinized, policies reformed, and a new culture of accountability began to take root. Katt's testimony had become a beacon, inspiring survivors to speak out and demanding that industries built on silence be transformed. Though the trial had concluded, the fight for justice and reform was only just beginning.